So welcome again. This is Shoshana Brigette, After Hours at Color Karma. With me, I have Ryan Stanley, Senior Director of Color Material at PVH, at PVH. Nikki Liza, footwear cobbler at a soon undisclosed location somewhere out west, maybe. Zack, who is Color Material Manager at KUIU. Am I pronouncing that right?
Correct.
Oh, good. And Art Scmehling, who I just love saying now is just a color bum. So we try and make these shorts. Our last one was about white on white. And we did a quick Google of white on white. And in the early 20th century, a class of chemicals was identified that could increase whitening by the actions of fluorescence. Yeah, of course, it's a chemical company. No surprise.
Oh, yeah.
So, and bleach destroys the clothes.
Yes.
So you need another way to excite everything to make it white again. So give me an example of another white on white. We've talked about paper. We talked about shoes. Shoes I always go back to because the minute it became a fad a couple of years ago to have the white shoes and everything white. And I'm looking going, oh man, that had to be a bitch in that job to find all those materials and sign off on that. I mean, some of that stuff fades quicker. And so you can have a sneaker with the back piece that might be yellowing. Your laces will be different. The soles, that's got to be a pain.
I think any absolute color you're going to have difficulty matching, right? So like the two most constant colors are absolute white and absolute black, something that reflects everything and something that reflects nothing. But coincidentally, they're also the most difficult colors to get consistent because it's something reflecting everything and something reflecting nothing. So the second there's any other bit of color in there, you're going to notice it. So per our other conversation, a blue casted white, a red casted white, a yellow casted light, even a little bit of lack of reflection in that white, you're going to notice in what direction it leans.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of, carry on that vein is like, if you think about it, everybody is the most sensitive to any changes at those levels because you are at the top or at the very bottom, of color space. So all of a sudden, everybody becomes a color expert. They understand the move or they understand that it is different. And so even people without much color sensitivity in their color vision, they're going to be able to notice that. And then
we have a whole set of organs dedicated to it, right? Rods and cones. Right. Like one whole set is dedicated to like depth of shade, like lightness, darkness, white and black.
White and black.
Yeah.
And I'm going to challenge the black one because I think grays are actually going to be harder to match.
Well, and everywhere in between. I think. Yeah.
Well, then now we're in the full spectrum.
Monochromatic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to find a neutral gray, I think that's going to be harder to match than a solid black.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at it, with the rods and cones, you've got the cones, which are really sensitive on the lightness, darkness. Okay. They're doing that. And your rods, you've got your three different kinds. I think I've got those right, but
I think you got it right. Yeah, and the associated
optics. So too.
And you want to think of them as band passes across the spectrum. So you want to think of them as being short, medium, and then long or far.
Longer.
So it's not really, and they build together to be able to give you your perception. So yeah, but the lightness, darkness. I mean, when you start thinking about color, human vision, it's you start thinking about the sensitivity to light too. When you think about that on a full moon, that you're able to see as well as you can. And it's what, 1/2000th of the amount of light on a really bright sunny day.
Well, to that point though, now you're talking about illuminance, right? Yeah. So daylight, cool white, incandescent, U35, like whatever else like that. Yep. Whites reflect all light, right? So they are a direct representation of whatever illuminant you happen to be under. So if there's a discrepancy between a garment that has, like polyester, polyamide, nylon, cellulosic cotton, and I'm using different classes of optical brightener to dye these things, depending upon what aluminum I'm under, I might notice differences even more. Yeah.
And then the other thing is depending upon the material and what you're allowed to be able to use to make it to use as a white. So titanium dioxide is the biggest one that's used in, say, coatings and plastics, but you have your different types. And then
I thought you were going to talk about printing for a minute, where you have to lay down a white layer before you put color on top of it.
Well, or you've got your differences in your substrates,
the substrates have different whitenesses as well.
Which was interesting is that, Joe, that's kind of what you were talking about earlier with the differences of the textile that's coming in, okay, that you're printing on, to be able to get there and what's in that, and then that's where, if you think about it, those optical brighteners, like we were mentioning earlier, those optical brighteners that are in that substrate to make it whiter, then affect different colors differently depending upon where they're fluorescing within the spectrum.
Talking about your perception of the colors that they're partnered with.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you look, if you think about it, so like an optical brightener, if you have an optical brightener in a white and you print like a yellow over top of it, because it's absorbing a lot of that blue energy, and say it's one of the more traditional blue ones, it doesn't necessarily impact it as much.
I see what you're saying. I was more thinking like the colors that you're coordinating with it. So if you have a print of, red, white, and blue, but it's primarily white, your perception of that red might be lighter than what it actually is, because your mind's just sort of like mixing them all together.
If you have a purple, it could shift a little bit depending on how it goes back to back. So
and I think what Art's talking about is not just the material, but what you do with it as well. So if you have a white material optical brightener and you're putting the yellow, or even a white, so we talk about print with a varnish on top, it's still white on white, but now you're still changing it and shifting both how you perceive it, but also, whether or not it's coated or varnished or laminated, all those things will impact the perception of it. So, and Joe, you looked at incoming material, right?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah. Have you all ever experienced like white on white on different construction types? So I remember taking like a white t-shirt with a rib trim detail, or even like a cotton fleece with rib trim detail. You would notice generally the trim detail would flare a little yellow or change in color a little bit compared to the main body.
Right.
Because of the texture of the material is what you're saying?
I would say it's probably because of the texture, but probably how they finish the material to try to create likeness in white with the material.
See, I've seen t-shirts where some parts of it will fade, especially like my kids will go to vintage 80s, and those white
white anymore.
Those collars are not as white as they used to be, but you could see the yellowing and stuff. And part of it is the material. Part of it, sadly, is also the sweat of where, things are. Everything is going to affect that material and shift its color. But it's going to change over time.
Well, even your blacks will fade, if you go to a vintage store and get an old Stanley t-shirt or something, it could fade to maybe look a little brown, and then the black pants you want to wear with it that you've had for 10 years might be fading a little more like greenish, so you're not wearing
my AC/DC shirt is not black anymore in the bottom of my drawer. I'm gonna have to check that later.
Black.
Well, the components that make up the black, right? Your additive subtractive color, you got to throw yellow, red, blue, whatever at that to absorb all the wavelengths of light. And if your blue breaks down first, if your green breaks down first, if your yellow breaks down first, then you're going to see the other components that made up that black. So
Correct.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like in paint or in plastics, you can use a true black. So it's going to be around a little bit easier. So that's one of the nice things about in plastics and paints, where you can use a true black. You can't really get a true black for working in textiles and that.
Is there a structural color version of white? I know there's a structural color version of black, like that whole Vanta black.
The Vanta black up here in Harvard.
Oh
well, where they're trying to, so that the carbon nanotubes.
The carbon they're basically building a microscopic light trap
Yeah, to capture all the light so nothing bounces back. I wonder if there's a structural version for not optically brightened white, but
just white,
just
reflects
white, where
it all back.
That's the barium coating, or say a spectralon type coating, which is a white coating that's used within your instrumentation. Okay, it's also used with cameras, or you use it in different areas where you have to reflect out all the light. Now, it doesn't reflect back everything at 100% because it's a natural material. So you're generally going to be like 90, generally you're going to be 98, 99% above. Okay.
So were we going to see that in the camera?
Well, I mean, it's coating certain parts. So like we use, like at X-Rite, we used it within
inside of Spectrum.
Inside the Spectrum, yeah.
Inside the Spectrum. It's used in different areas where you have to be able to make sure that all the light's coming back in or going out. And
so camera makes sense.
And what's interesting is that with where cameras and phones and things are going now, and how imaging, you're seeing that kind of white or the absolute black being used in different areas, because depending upon where the sensor is, they either want all the light coming in equally, or they may only want certain light coming in, and then any directionality, it totally absorbed with a black, so.
The more you know.
Yeah.
The more you know. Knitting. So now you have a pattern inside the white. And so that's going to also change your perception of how you see that color.
You're talking about like specular versus diffuse reflectance, like you're trapping some light.
You're trapping different wavelengths inside. So it's changing your perception. It's not changing the spectral readings, but it's changing your perception, because now you have the material is so obvious to see, right?
I think that's
and
where
you've got light and shadows in it.
I think that's where you notice the. Go ahead, Art. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, what you're really talking about there is more what you would term as a geometric metamerism.
Right.
So you've got a shape, or you've got something that's causing the light to reflect back differently.
Correct.
In different directions, depending upon the orientation of the sample.
Right.
So, and that could be like to your rib cuff to the t-shirt earlier, that could be playing into it a little bit, because it would make it look, if you think about it, you got the light is not necessarily reflecting back in the same way. It could be reflecting back a little bit darker, which would dim that down a little bit, could cause it to appear really more yellow, say, than the main body, which is maybe it's a tighter knit or it's a smoother finish.
Yeah, I would think that the texture of the material, you'd notice whatever cast of OBA you're working with a lot more, right? So you're bouncing that blue or that yellow or that red around more. So you might notice the tint of the white more on textured materials. I could be wrong.
Hint. Nikki, you were going to say something?
Well, the texture of the fabric or material, but also the texture or like cross-section shape of the yarn itself. If you have a tri-lobal yarn or something, that's going to bounce back light much more than like a fuzzy or woolly kind of yarn. So yeah, it really gets pretty granular when you think about it. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. And if you think about different materials, and I won't know, it's like canvas is going to be different just because of the material itself compared to a silk. Right. So now you've got the material behaving differently. And, we were talking about shoes. What other white on white challenges have we seen? I mean, I see it everywhere because it catches my eye. So it's not some blacks as much, except for Nikki, to your point, over time, those fade. To me, it's trying to match white on white or gray on gray.
Yeah. Gray.
Right. So, and your eye is very sensitive when that gray shifts right out of that little area. And all of a sudden you're going, oh, that's a little pinkish. It's a little greenish, a little bluish.
Well, you have the materials, a white material that might yellow or be a little slightly different white than the material it's next to. But then you have the adhesives that could be under a film on a shoe, or you have adhesives that you're applying the midsole to the upper. If you see any marks from the glue, that'll be super, super yellow in no time,
Yeah. Is there an expectation of how long something should stay white for footwear, Nikki?
I just think, we don't ever want to see anything getting returned because your white shoe turned yellow, so I think that, I don't know, maybe it's up to the company.
You left one shoe on the back seat of your car during a hot summer day,
And one shoe's now
walking
yellow.
around with one white shoe and one yellow shoe. Yeah.
Oh, or you put tape on the shoe, you stick it outside, and all of a sudden you got stripes on your shoe because it's faded. See, we'll start doing our own experimentation. With cars, we have pearlescents. Those are added to the cars to give it the different
really
materials.
white, though, right?
I'm not using the right word, Art.
Well, no, I mean
iridescence.
If you look at the pearl that came into the white, that Cadillac really made famous a couple years ago or a few years back, when it had that real soft, that iridescent kind of a look. And really, the pearls or the special effects are used to soften it up or to give it more of a depth of feel to it.
Yeah.
To the white, to the color, because I mean, with paints and with coatings, that's what you have to do, especially on a car or something like that. Otherwise, it looks rather flat. Even though, if you look at it now, the flatter look is in with cars. It's interesting that it's trending that way.
It's trending, but it's also harder to match. I mean, once you have the pearlescence in there, if you have to get something repainted, it's really now more difficult to find and match it when if it was a flat matte, you can spot those very easily if it's different.
Because then that comes down to, well, a lot of the things we've been talking is the application, how it's sprayed out, who sprays it, directionality, how it's built up, what components are in there.
It's the sustainability of whites.
Yeah.
Optical brighteners, the different types of minerals that you talked about, Art, earlier in regards to trying to get certain types of whites. Because I think there's a perception. You guys just tell me to shut up if I'm going down a path you don't want to talk about.
Shut up. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. I'll just sit here and
no, go ahead. I was teasing you.
No, I was going to say, like, you have sort of, in my opinion, there's sort of an industry perception that white is like clean, right? Like, make your whites whiter, like you have clean, white, fresh underwear, like kind of a thing, right? But when you start to think about everything that goes into making a white, making something reflect everything, the optically brightened chemicals that go into it, the peroxide bleaches or chemical bleaches that go into bleaching the raw materials before the OBA is applied on top of it, the different types of scientific application, like inside of a spectrophotometer, that's maybe a little bit different, but printing, right? Laying down a white coating before you put color on top of it to be able to get the vibrant color, or just have it be white.
The fibers have to be dyed white or bleached white, so you have the papers white.
Discharge printing, and then printing and packaging, like that whole shebang. Like, when you really think about whites, your first impression might be a nice white t-shirt is clean and is sustainable and it's white. But when you kind of peel that onion back a little bit, and maybe it's not as sustainable as we thought. Maybe people don't connect those dots, and I should just sit here and keep drinking. I don't know.
No, I think you have a valid point.
I think, to me, that's interesting, because to me, coming out of the industry or working in the industry where I'm at, is, white has always been the challenge, because how can we help our customers be able to manage it and communicate them? And that's the largest key. What's interesting to me is kind of where you're going to is, what are the trends with white? And that would be it would be interesting to hear from, the footwear, or even, from the apparel area. Is that, like, is there a change where people are concerned about those sorts of things?
I don't think anybody's even thinking about it.
I don't think anybody's thinking about it. I mean, Joe, you work with printed textiles, right?
Correct.
So do you specify a specific white, or, I mean, because I know in wide format, when, anything that's wide, there's tons of different types of materials, and they're all going to be, quote, white, but they're all going to be different. So, do you work with a range of whites? How do you specify it for what you're doing?
Well, the goal is definitely to try to pick a white, because we work across multiple substrates and different fiber types, from wool all the way to polyester. So we have to kind of identify a commonality between all the different fiber types and what they could achieve in terms of that shading in white. Because if we were to achieve the colors we want, in particularly our camo colorways, because it has to be consistent and look exactly identical no matter what substrate you put it on. Without that first component of making sure the white is normalized, your colors could look off from any substrate you try to place a color on top of. But one thing I do want to bring up, especially in the textile industry, hearing everybody kind of talk about whites, one of the biggest challenges I think for an apparel, especially in tights, is opacity, or even a top. So you go into creating, like, say you have a black t-shirt, you do in kind of cut and sew. You finally bring out your array of different colorways, white's one of them. And then when people finally get the white t-shirt and they're like, why is this so sheer? Why is this so opaque? Like, okay.
Grin through now, yeah.
Correct. So some companies may go a little bit heavier on the white colorway and keeping the same weight as maybe a darker shade. But tights specifically, you probably don't see a whole lot of white tights out there because of the whole opacity.
That's a good call out. How you have to have a heavier construction in order to kind of hide the grin through that you might not otherwise see with a darker material. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
I don't know, just white sneakers and you get that first scuff, you get, oh my God, I can't imagine white tights, white shirt, white everything. God bless you. I'd mess that up just walking out the door.
Yeah.
There'd be a stain on there.
If you have a white jacket or something, like, oh, it gets dirty so fast, but it's getting dirty is the same rate as anything else is getting dirty.
You just don't see it.
You don't see it. And, Ryan, you talked about the Tide, right? Because they put the optical brighteners. You can actually buy different types of brands of optical brighteners alone and just take all your whites, shove them in the wash, throw that in and start making them whiter again, right? So,
or go out of your way to buy a specific detergent that doesn't have optical brighteners, and then you'll see what your clothes really look like.
Yeah.
Okay. What detergent does not have an optical brightener in it?
I think some sustainable detergents, right? Yeah. So sustainable detergents or detergents that you're trying to avoid. What am I trying to say? Hyperallergenic, like trying to get something that doesn't have any chemicals in it in case somebody's got skin allergies or things like that. A lot of those don't have additional chemicals like optical brighteners in.
Are optical brighteners especially bad for the environment or people with allergies?
That's what I was saying for sustainability. Yeah. I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Because I mean, if you have sensitivities, it's already in the fabric. So washing it with optical brighteners, why is that going to aggravate my clothes again? Because I already bought it with the optical brighteners in there.
I don't know that the optical brighteners are the issue, or like you were talking about, Ryan, is that the complete process. So if you look at everything that goes into just making a white or making all this white materials, because it's that entire process.
What else is in that effluent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you look at it, and it's interesting, because everybody's talking about, using different materials. I mean, I know it's always been like in apparel, there's always been the comments that, there's more pure cotton than there's actually any, cotton that's made, or 100% cotton than is actually made at any time. So it's one of those things that's, we got to be careful, or I don't think it's been looked at. And I think it'll change.
I don't think it's really been looked at, or if it has, it's maybe only specific instances by certain groups for, niche applications.
Yeah, I think it's going to be niche applications. I mean, we gave the example of computers earlier, right? Mm-hmm. If Apple comes out with a white, every single part's going to have to match, right? Yeah. Your automobile.
That's why they moved away from it, right? Actually, that's a good call. To my understanding, I read an article. That's why Apple moved away from that on their phones, and now they just have space gray and silver. Mm-hmm. And the last white iPhone they had was what, the 5?
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
I don't remember. I have a red one.
I think it was like the 4 or the 5.
Yeah, I've got the red.
But I think the bigger impact, it's interesting to me, just to kind of bring it back up, is because everybody's looking at more sustainable materials, and then you start thinking this plays right into it, because this is one of the largest colors that's really out there.
Yeah.
But again, is it sustainable?
Yeah. And
it's in everybody's core palette. It's white.
Yeah. It's white, but is it even sustainable?
It's, it's one of those things, is like, we love to talk about color, but the largest selling colors is white and black,
Yeah.
And now let's talk about recycled, right? whether or not it's recycled textiles or recycled paper, now you definitely have to add chemicals to make that white again. So again, is white as sustainable, or now if we want to be sustainable, is adding that process better than making new, right? Which one's worse, which one's better? And I don't know anybody looking at that for sure.
No, yeah, that's clever. I hadn't thought about that. On the surface, you'd think that a black t-shirt would be less sustainable because of the stuff that goes into it. But when you start to think about everything that you have to do to a white t-shirt to get it to be white, to have it maintain being white in your launder or while you're washing your clothes and things like that. And then to your point, if you're trying to recycle garments, recycle polyester, recycle nylon, refurbish or repurpose cotton into rayon and things like that, now you're dumping all of these chemical treatments to try to get it white again. Whereas for a black, oops, I dyed it green by accident. You didn't want green, you wanted yellow. Somebody ordered black. Okay, over dye it black.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Anybody else got an example for whites, grays, blacks? You've got your jacket, but how many materials is your jacket made out of?
Oh, I don't know. A bunch.
A bunch.
I'm not sure. I don't know. You put me on the spot. I have no idea. 15-ish.
No, that jacket's like what? Not even 15. That's half a dozen.
I don't know.
I don't know. Now he's going to have to take apart his jacket.
Yeah. So now I'm going to be after this call, I'm going to be sitting here staring at my jacket for.
But if you think about it, I mean, people could think of a white T-shirt, right? They don't think about how many different materials are actually in that white T-shirt. The collar, the threads, the edge, everything. And there could be so many different things. They just say white. And
maybe not a T-shirt, but a dress shirt.
A dress shirt.
A T-shirt, you're probably just dealing with like maybe a 60-40 cotton poly, or something along those lines, or 100% cotton or something like that. But a dress shirt where you have the collar and the trim and the button, or if you're dealing with like fancy collar shirts, like the little inserts where you don't want anybody to see those bits, or you have your if it's a fancier shirt, if there's a layer in it
on the inside,
or on the collar. Yeah, I mean, now you're talking about quite a few components.
And we talked about nylons and all these other materials. Let's face it, they're plastics. I'm looking at my Logitech keyboard. The keys are a different black than the back of the keyboard, and they're different materials. So one's glossy, one's matte, but they're absolutely different materials. Even you can feel the difference. So the minute you introduce whether or not it's the materials or whites or blacks, it's that same triangulation you're always trying to do. It doesn't matter if it's color. It can be black, white, or gray and still have the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
Nikki, is your hair all black?
Mostly. There's some gray in there.
We all got a little gray. But on the video,
I'm getting gray in the beard now. Oh, man.
Yeah, Art's got a little white there going.
You got more than me, Art, but mine's coming along. It's in
there. So, guys, I want to thank you very much, as always, for this evening's topic of white on white, black on black, gray on gray. It's not just about color sometimes. So thank you, Art, Joe, Nikki, and Ryan.
Cheers.
This is Shoshana.
Thank you.
Wave goodbye, everybody. Thank you, and cheers. We'll speak next week.
All right.
Yeah.
All righty.
Bye, guys.
Bye.